Hey reader, welcome back to the channel. This is Centaur here, and today we are continuing in our So You Want to Play series, because you guys love the last one so much, by looking at the KV-1, another one of the big boys, the big heavy rolling tanks, in this case from the early war period. Built in the late 1930s, we have a big hulking tank that can roll onto the battlefield in order to support Soviet forces and Finnish forces. And as we're looking at it, we're going to talk about how to use it with both of those because it does work for both. Once again, I'm not convinced the KV-1 is the new meta. That being said, after working on the slides for this video, I might take this to an event because I think it's not horrible. There are ways to win with this thing, I promise. And maybe I need to just put my money where my mouth is. Admittedly, a relatively cheap tournament entry fee, but put my money where my mouth is to showcase, hey, you can win with these things. And if I do, I'll do an after action report and I'll tell you how it went. But suffice it to say, like we've been doing with all the things in this series, we're going to talk about why people don't tend to run the KV-1 as a with the hope of actually winning, right? People run it because they like it. They don't run it because they think it's good in bolt action. Then we're going to talk about what the KV-1 offers, why this is a good one, and why I'm doing, for the Soviets, the KV-1 over and against something like the IS-2 or the IS-3. Because at present, I don't have plans to do a video on those. If you really want to know how to do it, and you better really want to know how to do it, I will make a video on those. Let me know down in the comments below. Okay. In addition, I will show you what my list would be at 1,000 points and how to do it. And because of the fact that some of you people don't like some of the things that I like on this channel, insert commentary on how this is not an optimization channel, even though I keep getting branded among the optimizers, I am not, as evidenced by this video and what you're about to see. I did provide a second list that's a little closer to what the meta people really like, but it uses stuff that I don't like. But then at least you'll be able to see it because maybe that's more your play style, and that's the whole point of this video, right? Is to help you out in finding out how you, playing the stuff you like, can do this, okay? And so I actually am providing two lists here today, and fun story, they are actually relatively compatible, or at least one of them is relatively compatible with the Finns as well. So to give you an idea on how to run a Finnish list. We're then going to talk through what the list should be able to accomplish for you and kind of the overall strategy element. And then we're going to deep dive. We're going to go looking at the 6 scoring missions in the rulebook, which a lot of the custom missions that people design, including myself, kind of borrow the same principles from. So even if you're walking into a tournament with custom scenarios, these will still be helpful for giving you a concept of how you should go about trying to attain victory. And then it's all just down to tactical in terms of how you accomplish and execute on that strategy. And then from there, we'll talk about thoughts on how you might improve on this at a 1,250 point list. Okay, so to start off with, why don't people run the KV-1? Well, frankly, because it's very expensive, right? I mean, at 260 to 280 points regular, or 316 to 336 points veteran, that's easily a quarter to a third of your 1,000 point force, right? I mean, that is a substantial investment, right? And so I could see a lot of people saying, man, if this thing just rolls poorly, I threw away so much of my army just trying to field this thing and it did nothing for me. And if that's the case, I get it. I often make that same decision when I run Soviets. I don't tend to run this very much competitively. In fact, even in second edition, I tended to run the KV-2 over the KV-1 because I found the heavy howitzer was actually more useful than the medium AT gun in the last edition. It's also just really difficult to make back your investment because you only have a medium anti-tank gun, a coaxial machine gun attached to that, a forward-facing machine gun, and a turret rear-facing machine gun. You can see it sticking out there over there in the back, which is the reason why I chose this photo for looking at that. I'm not big on rear-facing machine guns, and you're going to see that a lot more when we do the review of the Japanese book. I'll save it for then because there's no need for us to talk about it now. I will say this, if I'm going to have a rear-facing machine gun, I would rather it be on something that can brawl near the center of the board. And the damage value 10 plus, armored all around, KV-1 can do that. So it's not that bad here, but being able to make back points off of effectively 3 machine guns or 2 machine guns and a medium AT gun is actually relatively difficult to do when you're shooting for somewhere between 260 and almost 340 points, okay? It is also slow, which means unlike the Tiger one that we looked at last time, this only has a 6 to 12 inch move and you cannot double it on road, similar to the Tiger. So closing with things and moving on to things is actually relatively difficult to do. There's a good number of turns where you're probably just going to need to perform a run order instead of moving and shooting because you just physically need to get to a certain place on the battlefield. And that does come with problems. Okay. It also comes often with a low order dice count. Most armies that are going to field this, if you're just building them on easy army, you'd be hard pressed to get above 12. And 12 at 1,000 points is not very many. Okay. And that could cause you to lose a game right there because if they can just remove the 5 or 6 order dice that you used to pad your list, there's a very good chance they're going to get 2, 3, 4 activations on you. And that means they're going to be throwing pins at a bunch of these vehicles and anything else you may have remaining, if not removing some of them. And you're going to find you're going to be on the back foot the entire game. And it's going to cost you in terms of final dice count and final victory points count. In addition, you're often trying to sacrifice other things in order to fit this in. So very often you're going to have like no supporting fire outside maybe like a couple light mortars, which is not good because it means as your army's moving up, you're going to get pinned down and you're not going to be doing a lot of pins back because of moving and shooting penalties and the fact that ranging in doesn't always happen very easily. You know, like there's just a lot of factors that play into it. And that's something worth noting, right? You might have to sacrifice your infantry quality. You might have to go for inexperienced troops, which are a lot harder for holding objectives than going for regulars or veterans just because you want to fit them in. Or you may not take very good armor to escort this thing. Obviously, you're not going to include something like a T-34 or T-30, T-35 or T-28 in order to escort this thing because between those two armored vehicles, you'd have half your points, right? And so the result is that very often you don't have the tools on the board that you would like to have to escort this thing. And so this is the part of the video where we look at these 5 things and we say, those are very good points. So let's break them all and let's make sure we're running something that makes up for the fact this is a big investment, that helps it to make back its points for us, that covers over the fact that it's slow, gives us a solid number of order dice, and still provides us with the escort that we need. So what does this thing offer to you? First of all, it has a medium anti-tank gun, which means against the overwhelming majority of vehicles you're actually going to see on the table. This is a perfectly serviceable gun. This thing is able to pin, even at long range, a veteran damage value 10 plus vehicle. In a mirror match against another KV-1 that's taken veteran, you can pin this thing at any range, from any facing, which is fantastically good, right? The overwhelming majority of people are going to be running damage value 7 or 8 armored vehicles, which means you not only have a good chance of pinning those things at any range, you have a very good chance of wounding these things and actually removing these things over the course of the game. You're glancing on 2s or 3s respectively, as long as you're within 30 inches of them, which is a lot of the board, especially if you deploy closer to the center instead of off to a side, okay? So it will work, okay? It can work to remove armor reliably. The overwhelming majority of armor you're going to find, especially if you're playing against a person who's playing on meta. For people who want to play a more thematic army and want to run a KV-1, this thing will work well against on-meta forces. You just have to make sure that you keep the pins off of it. More with that with the list we're going to talk about. And you guys have probably already figured out where we're going with this. And then second, you just need to make sure that you're competitive on the order dice so you can activate reliably early on in the round before people try to start stacking pins on you. Second, it has 3 machine guns. Or 2 machine guns and a 1 HE template if that works better for you on a given turn, which means you can actually remove small squads of infantry, and you can actually put pins or wounds on big squads of infantry, which most of these larger armored vehicles are actually not very good at doing. Or they pay an awful lot more because they're taking like a really big anti-tank gun. But this guy can actually do it pretty effectively because it's got that funky rear-mounted turreted machine gun. And so while, it means you're going to be facing in kind of weird directions, or the enemy slotted, kind of skewed past you because they were running past you to get to an objective or something like that, you can actually do a decent number of pins, if not wounds, on a given turn with this thing, which is great. It's also damage value 10 with armored all around, as we mentioned, which means for those of you who didn't watch the armored all around video, they don't get any penetration modifiers for being at your sides, your rear, or your top. And by virtue of the fact that so far, the only things in the game that attack you from the bottom, which is dog mines and minefields, don't get a penetration modifier either. It means the only way that they increase their penetration at all is point blank range with non-HE, non-shaped charge weapons with a heavy weapon. That's the only way. And that means the actual number of weapons they're going to penetrate you reliably and actually remove you is extremely small, right? I mean, a light anti-tank gun at point blank range is glancing on 5s. It's only doing full damage on 6s. That means there's like I think it's around like a 9% chance if it hits. So probably lower than that. It's at least 6% chance, if not lower than that. That's the best it's going to get to, that it's actually going to destroy you, right? They're going to have to invest in bigger and bigger caliber weapons, which means more expensive armor or more expensive artillery, all of which is good news for us, okay? And if taken veteran, the ability to shrug off pins with damage value 10 armored all around, especially on a veteran vehicle, is insanely good, because on a veteran who's damage value 10 armored all around, light autocannons cannot pin you, period, because they cannot penetrate you, period. Anti-tank rifles cannot pin you, period. Low velocity anti-tank guns that are not within 6 inches of you cannot pin you. And even if they are within 6 inches of you, one pin. They cannot switch to the HE in order to get to you. Furthermore, and this is the really beautiful thing, you're really good at shrugging off pins from high explosive damage, which is where the D2 and D3 pins tend to come out. Heavy howitzers, you're still in trouble. Fair enough. However, because you don't even suffer the pen +1 bonus for the top armor, light mortars, medium mortars, heavy mortars, 0 pins. Light howitzers, medium howitzers, including those recoilless rifles that we talked about that can take, it's the cheaper way of getting your light howitzer and your medium howitzer, 0 pins. Absolutely no pins from any of those sources, which means the overwhelming majority of weapons that are going to try to pin you are going to be 1 pin at a time from a light or medium anti-tank gun. And all of those have to be able to see you, which means you can see them. And you have a medium anti-tank gun, which means the chances you remove them before they remove you is pretty high. The only exception to this rule are Panzer Ace veteran German armor, all of which are in the same cost range that you are. And that means you can duel quite well, as long as you don't have like a medium AT gun on a Chaffee getting within point blank range of you. And even then, glance on 4s, it's not horrible, right? As long as that's not the case, you're going to do pretty okay against enemy armor. You can brawl with them for the best, and there's a very good chance that you're going to live longer than they do. And I guess fundamentally what it comes down to is it's a centerpiece model, right? You build everything about your strategy, you build everything about your army around the weaknesses of this vehicle, but it allows you to have quite a few substantial advantages going into a match. And so we're going to take a look at the list, okay? This is my recommended army list, okay? You'll notice some of you were probably thinking I was going to run a heavy weapons platoon with this. And I'll be honest, I do have one of those. It's right here. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, okay? But I'm not going to do that. Do you know why? Because when I recorded this within the last few days, there were people on Facebook who were poo-pooing the artillery platoon, saying that it had, quote, no place, end quote, and that it was, quote, not good enough, end quote. And it kind of bugged me because I like artillery on this thing. Again, I don't know why people lump me in with the optimizers, because I'm not, okay? I like artillery platoons. And apparently they're, quote, not good enough, end quote. And so, you know what? Just because, and because it does actually help to cover stuff a little bit later that we're going to talk about, I'm including an artillery platoon because I think it's a great way to pad your order dice count. This is a very cheap platoon for 7 order dice. You're getting them for basically 20 points a model, which is really, really good. And so I'm going to include one because I think you're going to find it's going to be very useful, and because it's going to cover a lot of our bases to make sure that we're safe from some of the skew builds that people can run. But in this case, at high command, we have a company commander with a pistol, taken in experience, just the way we like it. We're going to keep him safe. He's going to be very important to keep safe because he's very important to the overall strategy. Okay, and then we're going to have a platoon commander with a pistol in our rifle platoon, leading 5 guards with 2 light machine guns. That way, we're getting 2 LMGs, 2 assistants, and an NCO. Gives us a volume of 8 to 9 shots going out, which is nice for a supporting fire squad. You know, if they go down, they'll be able to protect an objective, which is nice. We've got 6 Siberian veterans with submachine guns taken at veteran. If you haven't seen the Siberian veterans video, you really should. You can technically do this with a whole bunch of squads as long as they aren't something that comes with points already built in. I like the veterans. I tend to think they're more stylistically cool, and they do give you other options that are quite nice. You can check out the video if you want to see that. You got your AT rifle teams taken in experience. We got 2 of those in the rifle platoon because we can. And then we have a T20 Komsomlets. And I know what some of y'all are going to say. As an avowed member of the Scout Car Squad, and as arguably the person who gave it its name, though other people like Ian use it more. First of all, I can hear you guys saying traitor in the video right now. Here's the deal. I had a Scout Car in there, as evidenced by the fact that the other list we're looking at has one, okay? But I only had 15 order dice, and I wanted to get 17, and I found that if I switched out the Scout Car for the T20 Komsomlets, it gave me 17 points, which gave me 2 more horse-drawn limbers, which gave me exactly what I wanted, and so I made the switch. Also, I found I wasn't putting more than 6 bodies in there anyway, and so because of that, I didn't really need the 8-man capacity on the Scout Car. The Scout Car helps. Don't get me wrong, it's going to complicate some of the things. I have to caveat and explain contingency plans and other things because of the fact that we aren't taking a wheeled armored vehicle, we're taking a tracked armored vehicle. So don't get me wrong, I'm still solidly part of the Scout Car Squad, but we couldn't run it with this particular list. Okay, so just fair enough on that, just so everybody knows. In our armored platoon, we have the Tokarev Quad Maxim taken with the command vehicle upgrade at 65 points. The reason why is because we want to have the ability to snap to our KV-1. And if the KV-1 is the command vehicle, he can't snap to anybody. More accurately, he can only snap to other vehicles, and he cannot be snapped to by a company or platoon commander, because platoon commanders cannot be snapped to'd, lest you end up with the cascading things we had in 2nd edition that apparently people thought were a problem. I felt like it meant you had to take either multiple platoons, and you didn't get much if you were only running 2nd lieutenants, or you had to take a relatively expensive officer. So I didn't personally see a problem with it. But in 3rd edition, with how many platoon commanders we have running around, I see why it could be a problem, especially since they have more snaps on average. So I get it. But that means we aren't going to make the KV-1 our platoon commander. Okay? Instead, he's just going to be helping out. And we are taking this bad boy veteran. No, we are not taking the 20-point reduction to remove armored all around and the slow special rule. We will take slow because we need that armored all around. We are going to run this guy as the pin shedding, pin evading version. And starting with a morale of 10 certainly doesn't hurt. Okay? And then we're going to have a T-60 light tank with its light autocannon at 105 coming in to help us, which is awesome, and I think that's going to help out really well. And then in the artillery platoon, we have our platoon commander with a pistol in experience. We have 3 light autocannon AA guns with the full 360 all-around vision, which is nice. It has a gun shield. I don't know how often we're going to use said gun shield, but it does have one, so yay. Gives us options, I guess, if we want it. Again, see the gun shield video. I don't like gun shields. I loved them in 2nd edition. I do not love them in 3rd edition. There's so many reasons. Field sight tweaks would make them very nice, but we don't have those yet, so here we are. And then we've got 3 horse-drawn limbers, which some will say are throwaway dice. We will show you how throwing these away can actually be helpful in a lot of scenarios as we go along. But suffice it to say, 999 points, 17 order dice, not too shabby for what we want. Now, if you don't want to run an artillery platoon, or if you want to have more options or a larger Siberian veteran section, and you maybe want to also have a scout car in your list, all of which are excellent reasons, we're going to keep most of it the same, except that we're going to be able to throw in an extra furtherman on the platoon commander in the rifle platoon. We're going to be able to throw an extra Siberian veteran in there, which gives you 14 dice for volume, which is a really good amount of volume for shots with the submachine guns. We can upgrade the Komsomlets to the scout car, which is awesome because Scout Car Squad! But then in addition, we're going to have a heavy weapons platoon instead of the artillery platoon that's going to give us 3 light mortars and 3 AT rifle teams. Now, it hurts me that if you want to get up to 17 order dice, you cannot take advantage of a couple of things. First of all, you cannot take the 3rd extra person on these AT rifle teams because Soviet Union so far is the only one that can. And I'll just tell you, having tested with it, a 3-man AT rifle team is way more survivable than a 2-man AT rifle team. If for no other reason than one guy with the AT rifle can poke out from around a building and a ruin. The other 2 guys can stay behind it, and you are guaranteed to get your cover save unless they go all the way around that stuff. With 2-man, it's way more difficult because the guy who's firing has to be obscured on the head or torso buy the building or ruin from the angle that you're firing at, right? From wherever the enemy goes to. It's a lot easier to whip around, get that one guy out of it, and now you're not getting the benefit of cover, period. It's not that it drops your cover level. You don't get any cover at all. The second thing that I don't like is I don't tend to like inexperienced AT rifle teams because they basically never hit. Even when you get 5 of those, on average, 1, maybe 2 of them are hitting every turn. Whereas if we had 5 of these taken regular, or even 4 of these taken regular, you'd be guaranteed about 2 of them hitting every turn, which is really nice, okay? And so, like, it is problematic. The big reason why I'm doing it is, one, obviously, it's a little bit spiteful. I wanted to run an artillery platoon, so I did. The second reason is that this right here is extremely hard to recreate with a finish list because you don't get inexperienced basically anything, okay? And so because of that, I cannot build a similar list like this with the Finns, okay? So you can do this with the Soviets, and it's quite nice. But for the Finns, no dice. So I'm not going to be using this, though at times, since I know some people, they don't mind light mortars the same way I do. I really don't like light mortars. If you didn't see the video, it was very early on in this channel's existence. You can go ahead and take a look at that, okay? But if this appeals to you, I will be making nods to the variant list, and that's what this is throughout the video, okay? So I'm not leaving you behind. This is a perfectly fine way. This is originally how I had it planned. And then people started talking, and so I felt like I had to do something else. Okay, so what should this do? Well, first and foremost, it's good at vehicle hunting. Ironically, even though you don't have a lot of heavy weapons in it, it's actually quite good at vehicle hunting, right? The KV-1 can handle the bigger stuff, okay? AT rifles, T-60 can pin things, AA guns can pin things, right? The T-60 really is going to be helping to protect the KV-1 from really light tanks, right? So you can run it both running alongside if you really need to. If somebody's running an upgun, vehicle like a Chaffee, for example, or something like that, you can always run this nearby. So that way you're helping to pin that thing down. You're helping to fight off while it's doing the removal, right? And then your company commander ensures that people are actually shooting every turn, right? For infantry hunting, you have AT rifles, you've got infantry, you've got the T-60 for the punch. You also, in the variant list, you have light mortars, but obviously you also have the AA guns in the standard list. And so your ability to remove infantry is actually quite good in this list, with a variety of things ranging from machine gun fire to high explosive damage, which is nice because some of them are better in some situations than others. For campers, if you're playing with the variant list, you have light mortars to help kind of range in on them. Alternatively, you do have AA guns, you have AT rifles to just kind of plink away at people. And then the infantry are there with machine guns, in either submachine guns or light machine guns, to help to finish people off. And then you've got your morale bubbles. You've got a company commander, which you're going to always keep near the KV-1. If you have the scout car, you'll keep them near the scout car. If you have the Consum Leds, you have a little more freedom to move because of how we're going to be using that. You've also got the T-60. I would keep him probably close to the company commander as well, just because I want to make sure he's firing every single turn. And so the +4 to morale is really helpful for that. The platoon commanders are going to be near your supporting fire tools. Okay. And this is very important. You want to keep one near the Tokarev Quad Maxim and one of them near at least 1, if not 2 of your anti-aircraft guns, because if people are running aircraft, you need to have an answer for the aircraft. Now, good news. In our standard list, aircraft are toast. Even Flying Fortress Soviet stuff are toast because you are getting 24 machine gun shots from the Tokarev Quad Maxim and 6 shots from the 3 light autocannon AA guns as well. And all of those are 360-degree shots, which means even if they remove 1 or 2 of those tools, your chance of driving off aircraft is still extremely high. So good news, you can fight the enemy normally however you want. Even if you get pins on all of those tools, on average, you're driving off a Flying Fortress. So good news, air observers are toast. They're not going to do anything. And the Tokarev Quad Maxim on its turn with the 12 shots firing at a forward observer might actually remove the forward observer as well before he can call in a plane or even 2 planes in the case of an American. Okay, it's possible. So good news. Not only do we have morale bubbles, not only do we have good vehicle hunting, good infantry hunting, we have coverage against skew build options, okay? If people are running heavy amounts of scouts, congratulations, we can remove infantry in very large numbers, so infiltrators are not a problem. If they're running aircraft, we can remove aircraft. If people are running tons of light armor, good news, we have really good things for hunting and light armor. If they run a couple of big armored vehicles, we have things that can do all of those. So the skew build options, we have options for. The only things that might be able to try to mess us up is on meta, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So when we look at Seek and Destroy, especially if we're playing somebody who's on meta, what's it going to look like? The KV-1 is going to duel with enemy armor. They're going to be overwhelmingly DV7 to DV8, maybe a little bit of DV9, depending on how people choose to run them, which means on average, we're probably going to remove at least 1 to 2 of those, and we're not going to lose the KV-1 in the process. On balance, the KV-1 being veteran, damage value 10, armored all around, is not going to actually be removed by enemy armor, especially from an on-meta force. The T60 is then going to begin hunting enemy teams and armor. It's going to remove 1 to 2 lightly armored vehicles, but more likely infantry small teams. And you're probably going to lose it. I'm just going to be honest. You're probably going to lose this thing. Okay. Your AT rifle and your guards are all going to go on ambush. The nice thing about this is that, one, they can provide supporting fire down range, or they can just go down because they were on ambush, right? Which is really nice. So it means they can help to contribute to pinning or removing the enemy, but don't do it at the expense of the enemy then turning around and shooting back at you. Remember, your AT rifle teams are inexperienced. Your guards are only a 5-man squad. They're not particularly survivable. It is way more important that they go down than they have the chance of providing a pin to the enemy in a seek and destroy scenario. It is way more important that they go down, get the benefit added to their cover save, and stick around an awful lot longer. It also means these are not the priority for activating early as a general rule. You can activate these a little bit later because if somebody shoots at them beforehand, you just go down. Right? And then if you want to take the shots because they left you alone because they had more important things, like 3 auto cannons running around shooting at things downrange, or armored vehicles running around, or a Tokarev Quad Maxim running around, if they had other things more important to shoot at and they left you alone, then by all means, feel free to blink away if there's no way people can retaliate against you. But in general, leave these until later, and if the enemy tries to push up towards you, just run away. You do not need to fire. You do not need to participate. Get out of there, okay? Do not let them attack you at point blank range with these, okay? Your AA guns are then going to suppress from a distance. You're probably going to be able to remove 2 to 4 units with these, probably. And on average, you are going to lose one, okay? Just so you're aware, be prepared. You're going to lose one, okay? You probably aren't going to lose too many more than one because of how this list is built. You're going to have lots of cover, lots of overlapping lanes of fire for people to be able to shoot and be able to cover each other, okay? But just anticipate one of them is going to be destroyed, okay? You're going to rush the company commander and the Komsomlets with the Siberians and the KV-1 and the T-60 up close to crush the enemy at point-blank range. That's the ideal. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to form a box. And we're going to talk about this box quite a bit, where you've got the T-60, the T-60 light tank, the KV-1, and the T-20 Komsomlets kind of working together to surround the company commander who's sitting in the middle. And the nice thing about a bunch of these is if they aren't so tall that they block line of sight, there's a very good chance by overlapping them that until they wrap all the way around, in which case you have a lot of time to shoot them, you're going to be able to keep them from being able to get the company commander without a heavy cover save, okay? And if you can just run them in toward the center and then camp there to shoot at plenty of enemies to remove order dice, the company commander doesn't have to snap too. He can just go down, right? You don't have to do that with him. Right? And if you end up dropping out the Siberians out of the T-20 Komsomlets so they can go do their work, there's nothing stopping you from running the company commander into the T-20 Komsomlets, still giving orders to people that are outside and snapping them as needed, while being a good bit safer from small arms fire. You want to hide your limbers as best you can. These are the most fragile throwaway points that you're going to have. Even more important than hiding other stuff, you want to hide this guy. But good news, if you'd been running the variant list and you don't have the limbers, you'd have to find a way to keep safe 3 inexperienced light mortar teams and 3 more AT rifle teams, which you don't have in the standard list. So it's actually probably a little bit easier to hide these than it was with the other ones, because completely obscuring them behind forests, in the back of nowhere, ruins in the back of nowhere, buildings in the back of nowhere is actually a lot easier on this one, right? And then you just got to keep it safe from people trying to, encroach up or outflank or things like that, trying to get to it. My recommendation is wherever you're hiding these things, just put like an AA gun and an AA gun nearby. And then when you start getting to places on outflank, where people can outflank in from turn 3 onwards, just put those things on ambush. And then wherever they come in, just light them up and you're going to be okay. Now for the variant list, if you are running the light mortars and all of the extra AT rifle teams, reinsert, copy, paste what we talked about the AT rifles up top, right? Don't activate them early. Only take advantage of opportunity shots if you know you can't be retaliated against. Keep these guys alive as long as possible. Down is your best friend. Light mortars are kind of in a similar boat, but there's more to it than that, because you want to go down if you're targeted. You don't want to activate these guys early on. Late in the turn, though, if you haven't been shot at, and you have the ability to shoot at something, it's not a bad idea, again, if nobody can retaliate against you, to take a shot. And then at the beginning of the next turn, if it would be advantageous, you can activate them early on so you get a chance to now roll for fives, right? Before people have a chance to do anything to you. Just remember, fives is not that likely to happen. And you really don't want people then swooping in and removing you because that's points and Seek and Destroy. Okay. In other scenarios going onwards, forget what I just said because they aren't going to be scoring points for victory. They won't score victory points for removing you. Okay. That double tap that Bo Mortensen talks about totally works and it can be very effective. Okay. So you can do that with them. Just keep in mind, you just still need to keep them safe. For key positions, you're going to have somewhere between 5 to 7 objectives. You're going to have 3 to 4 of them near you because you get to place 3 or 4 of them. I would recommend placing 3 of them near your side, wherever it is that you're standing. Then place 1 closer to the center. So that way, when you roll for sides, if it's your opponent or you, it doesn't really matter. You're going to have 3 objectives near you, right? It's kind of the way that it's going to work out, one way or another. Whichever side you end up getting, the Komsomlets and the Siberians with them inside, that's going to be the full capacity, are going to roll up to a central objective on turn 1 and try to claim that as best you can. You may not be able to because if you're coming in off a first wave, a run would only get you 18 inches up. So you may not be able to do that, but I would still recommend running it anyway. I would just, put a down order on the Siberians and roll up a little bit later in the turn, which would be perfectly fine. But you want to push these guys toward that turn 1 objective. You then want to have the KV-1 roll onto that objective with the T-20 Komsomlets and actually hold it. Once you've claimed it as your own, you want to roll onto that with the KV-1. KV-1 is not likely to be removed, which means that objective is not changing hands. Okay, that one is going to be yours until the KV-1 is destroyed or fails an order test and rolls off of it, which, since we're going to be keeping our company commander near that KV-1, ideally will not happen, right? If it's a chancy thing about passing an order test, just rally. Just rally, okay? Because the most important thing is not to leave that position. You must stand your ground on that position. You're then going to claim the nearby objectives to your side of the table with your AT rifle teams, your AA guns. If you're running the variant, you would use your light mortars here, okay? You can also stick your limbers, by the way, near those and screen because while you can't shoot through your limbers, they can provide soft cover for men within the AT rifle team or the squad or the squad that's manning the AA gun. And while you may say, okay, well, soft cover 5+, that's great, what if they just destroy it and remove the order dice? First of all, if you've moved up to 4 of the objectives, which is the maximum you would ever need, you may only need 3 in order to win. You don't need to have the higher order die count necessarily, but once they're destroyed, getting that now permanent heavy cover on the side of your AA guns is really, really nice, right? Being able to work around now a heavy cover that you have, possibly helping to screen off an objective, is fantastically good. And people can't move through it. So depending on where you place it, that's a whole section within range of an objective that these AA guns are trying to cover that people cannot clip into, move into, be within 3 inches, and flip it and score, right? It's impassable. You can't move onto it. And so all of that is advantageous. But the point being, you're going to, kind of pair up and claim with objectives there. And then you're going to follow the KV-1 and the T-60 onto the next objective with the ones that are more mobile. So you can move an AT rifle team to follow up on these guys, just right on their butt, as long as they're clearing an objective and the enemy looks like they're pinned down and they aren't going to be able to do much to you on that objective. Feel free to follow with things like the AT rifle teams afterwards if you want. And then finally, the guards and the quad maxim, they are going to be push-up units. They are going to be pushing up to help with claiming objectives, but they're going to be pushing up once an objective is clear, because neither of these can take a lot of punishment. But in the case of a 5-man guard squad, they can go down on an objective, which is really nice, right? And so they can do the work on it. It just means you got to keep them safe, okay? Similarly for the quad maxim, it's only damage value 6. It doesn't get to roll in the damage chart. You have to keep this thing safe. You just use it for supporting fire, suppressing fire to push down range. And then once things are safe, you can roll it forward to a place that's at a better vantage point. But I think it's eminently winnable. You can claim 3 to 4 objectives reliably with this army, okay? For top secret, this one is going to be a little bit tricky because of the fact that we've got slow, big armor and we've got a tracked transport. It's not going to be as easy as with the Tiger one that we had before, okay? So first of all, we have a company commander. He's going to order the KV-1, the T-60, the Komsomlets, and the Siberians, and they're going to form that box that we talked about, and they're just going to push toward where the top secret objective is. You might be able to get to it on the first turn, possibly as early as the first activation of turn 1. if you start on the board in either a long edge or a quarters deployment scenario. You might be able to do it. The thing is, you would need to start on the board. If you're doing first wave, you may not necessarily be within range, so it might be that you get to it on turn 2, which could be problematic. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The KV-1, when it ends its turn, however, is going to pivot on its center, and it's going to turn sideways to help form the box. And the reason for that is because we don't get pen +1 to the sides. So now we're just a really, really big, we're talking 5 to 6 inches worth of big armored vehicle to block off and screen sight range and to give heavy cover to other stuff that's coming behind us, which means the T-60 and the T-20 Comsom-Lets can both kind of slide in behind that and make it so that half or more of their chassis from most people is also being covered by the KV-1, right? Until they start getting wide around you. And now they're getting potentially heavy cover off of him, let alone any terrain that they might be moving around, right? And then the company commander just slots right into the box, right? Make sure that you still have enough room to pivot out the KV-1 on the next turn, so that way, he can get where he needs to go. But you can slot him in right behind that, and you're pretty safe. Your company commander is going to be pretty darn safe. They'll have to whip pretty far around in order to try to get to you, okay? The Siberians are going to be the ones who are going to be grabbing the objective. They're going to be advancing out of the Comsom-Lets in order to get it, or running if they have to, in order to grab it. But the most important thing is going to be them running to get to the objective. And then finally, once they're up on it and they've got it, the rest of the army is just going to be pinning the enemy down while the Siberians mount up on turn 2. That's the entire plan, okay? As long as the Siberians get to mount up on turn 2, nothing else matters. Literally nothing else matters, okay? And then on turn 3, now that the T-20 Comsom-Lets is all loaded up, the Siberian veterans are on top, they've got the objective. Hopefully they still have bodies left. Who knows how many of them still remain. Everybody else is just going to be doing cover while the Comsom-Lets does a full 180 and books it home. Okay. One way that you can help to get this ready in advance, by the way, is when you take that final pivot. If you don't need the extra range, like of the nose of the thing, you can pivot it at least once, if not twice, maybe twice actually, if you're able to pull it off on an advance. As long as you can start pivoting around beforehand on the turns before, that's going to be advantageous because then you can full run instead of requiring you to advance because you needed 2 pivots to turn you around, right? Now, what happens if the enemy gets to the objective before you do? First things first, the Siberian veterans are still going to jump out. They're still going to be going for the objective. They just might be hosing people down with submachine guns at point blank range in order to get it. The second thing to think through is that the KV-1 has machine guns, right? The T-20 has a light machine gun, which is not going to be particularly useful. It's going to be hitting on like 6s, okay, which is not very great. The T-60 has a light autocannon. Whatever it is that's right there in the middle grabbing that objective and holding onto that briefcase, hose them down with as many tools as you can, okay? And ideally, hose them down with the long-range deployment, long-range fire sort of tools first, and then move your terror ball forward because, again, the unit's already got it. There's no reason for us to have to do the terror ball first. When the terror ball moves up, you want them to be able to polish off, and if possible, because of what's mentioned here, if the unit that's carrying it is destroyed in an assault, you see this over on the right-hand side set of columns in the third paragraph, the enemy that destroyed it can immediately claim the briefcase and place it next to one of their models before they make their regroup move, which means you might be able to, you can't assault straight out of it, okay? But if you get out on one turn, you hose them down with the submachine guns. On turn 2, you might be able to assault them, take it from them, and regroup and get out of there, which moves it back toward your part of the table edge, and then you can castle up with the box, the armored box, around the Siberians to get them ready to get back up into the Comsom-Lets, okay? So just note that there's that, okay? We're also guaranteed that infiltrators cannot be deployed within 12 inches of the briefcase. So unless they're infiltrating cavalry, which is not particularly common, okay? Can happen technically speaking, but it's not particularly common. You will have at least a fighting chance, especially with 17 order dice, to be able to grab it first. And then it's just box up and then roll out and protect the Comsom-Lets as it falls back. And at that point, the objective is yours. You've won the scenario. When looking at demolition, your KV-1 is not going to push up in this one. interestingly enough, both because we want them to survive, and the closer you get to the enemy puppy guarding their base, the more dangerous it gets because you might end up with an AT gun with point blank range getting to you, okay? Instead, we're going to have him basically sitting about halfway on the objective, maybe a little bit further out from the objective, but the big and important thing is, because of how wide and how long the KV-1 is, it means that that whole semicircle half of potential units that could try to score within range of your objective can't actually get in scoring range, because they have to stay at least 1 inch away from the KV-1 as long as it's alive. And you're covering more than 3 inches out from the vehicle, right? You know, from the demolition objective, there isn't a space within 3 inches that they can go from that whole side. And if they do destroy you and remove that 1 inch bubble around you that they're not allowed to enter unless they're assaulting, and thus not allowed to stay there if they do end up assaulting you and then fail and have to move back, even if they destroy you, they still can't get within 3 inches. So now, congratulations, you only have to worry about half of the potential scoring distance. And that's where we're going to be putting our autocannons, okay? We're going to be guarding this thing with machine guns and an AT gun on one side and autocannons on the other side. That's how we're going to guard our objective, okay? The Comsom Let's is going to be kept in outflank, and he's going to have a platoon commander and 2 AT rifle teams in him, okay? You can throw in a second platoon commander if you want to. I tend to find it's useful to have the other morale bubble elsewhere, but we'll talk about this later. You technically have enough space for 2 one-man platoon commanders, which we have left you, and 2 AT rifle teams, which we have in the rifle platoon, all available to you, and they can all fit in the Comsom Let's if you want it, okay? Just know the strategy that we have does not strictly require you to have 4 units in there. You can have 3, okay? And then the last 4 dice of turn 3, okay? You just play the game puppy guarding, throwing shots down range. Try to work down as many guys as are around the demolition objective as you can. But your last 4 dice of turn 3 are going to be your units coming in from outflank. You're going to advance the Comsom Let's, and then you're going to run the platoon commander and the AT rifle teams into scoring range. Now, if they deploy them nearer to the center, basically right on the center line, so that you cannot reach them with the Comsom Let's, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the reason why we're doing this is if you get 3 units within scoring range, remember, you don't have to clear everybody out from the objective. They just have to be within range. Even if there is an enemy unit of any type within 3 inches of it, you get to roll a 4+, and on a 4+, the base is destroyed. And we're giving you 3 chances to do that, which on average means even if you lose 1 of them, because maybe, you know, you don't get all of the last dice of the turn, you have to run the Comsom Let's up, and then you have to run a unit out, and then they get to activate their final unit of the turn, and they destroy that unit because all of these are inexperienced units, and they only have 1 to 2 bodies in them, and you're probably not going to get cover, and, you know, just various and sundry reasons. Even if the last 2 dice that go onto it, you have a 50% chance of ending the game. You'll blow it up, and that's it, right? And if you can get all 3 of them on it, you have a 66% chance of getting it. If you get 4 of them on it, you're at like an 87% chance, okay? You will blow it up, and that will end the game. And as long as you kept them from blowing up yours, which again, half of it they can't even score in. The other half of it, they got to work their way through multiple autocannons in order to try to get to. And on turn 3, if you know that your opponent has outflankers because they're pulling the exact same shenanigan that you're doing, maybe they're doing it even better with an M3 White Scout car, because newsflash, Scout cars are better at this, both because they get a 12-inch advance, or possibly even a 24-inch run, and your boys still end within range because you have infantry that are in within range of it because they're inside the car. I don't think there's anything in here that says they cannot be in a transported vehicle. There's nothing in it that says that. And your units would still be within range. Even more so if you have a road to help you out. As long as you can get your guys within range to get to that objective, I mean, it's yours, right? I mean, this is the play. This is an excellent way to do it, right? And so, you could end the game at the end of turn 3 very easily with a win with this list. Now, let's say you can't reach it. You look at it and you're like, man, that's right on center line, which means I know even on a B line, the T20 Comsom Let's with a 9-inch advance and then a 12-inch run getting everybody off the nose of it is only going to be 21 inches. And they might be 36 inches in on the table. We're not going to make it. If that's the case, earlier in the turn, if you want to, you can go down with all the passengers because they aren't going to be hopping out. on the first turn. Then you're going to perform a run order with the Come Some Let's and just run him to a safe location near the background. Okay? And then you're going to wait to activate him and do the exact same shenanigan until late on turn 4. The trick to this, and what makes it slightly harder, is you do have to then, on turn 4, already have worked down anybody who could try to whip around and shoot at that Come Some Let's and try to get rid of it, okay? Because those are the guys who are going to be able to destroy the stuff. Those are the guys who are going to actually be doing the work for us. My recommendation is just pound whatever units are on that side. Light them up with the autocannons. If you can get the Tokarev Quad Maxim or the T-60 on that side to also do it. And it's not a bad idea to have them kind of pushing that way. Just light them up, pound, pound, pound. We at least want pins because we want them, if they try to activate to try to get to the T20 Come Some Let's, we want them to fail. We want them to at least have pins and moving and shooting penalties. All of that is going to help to keep us alive, okay? But it is still eminently winnable with the T20 Come Some Let's. And so you could do well even at demolition. Now, if somebody's going to castle on you and they've got 2 really big armored vehicles and they're sitting on that, newsflash, you're not going to win. Okay? I'm just going to tell you, you're not going to win. If they're short armored vehicles, you might actually be able to get one of your guys within 3 inches of the objective, beyond 1 inch of their bubbles. You might be able to do it. But if they're running a solid castle with most light tanks, DV8 light tanks, and most medium tanks, I mean, you're probably going to be pushing for a draw either way. Okay? Still try to go after them. Still try to remove and damage the armored vehicles so that way you can get rid of them and thus at least remove the 1 inch bubble. You might be able to sneak something in, but it's going to be pretty darn hard. And then for hold until relieved, we're going to put the Come Some Let's with the Siberians. We're going to jump up onto the objective as quickly as we can. If there are enemies there, we're going to clear them out, and then we're going to claim the objective as quickly as we can. Okay? Then we're going to roll the KV-1 right onto it. This is the exact same strategy that we had for key positions with that central objective. And then that way, for the rest of the game, the opponent has to remove a veteran squad that can just go down for the whole rest of the game. They don't have to do anything else if they don't want to, right? Unless like the submachine guns work. And they have to remove the KV-1 in order to win the game. So all we have to do is pull up our armored vehicles or whatever alongside the KV-1 so that we're giving it heavy cover against potential attacks. The KV-1 could potentially just rally the entire game. Just remove pins. That's all it has to do. Of course, admittedly, by the way we built this, they're going to be doing 1 pin at a time. Right? With everything. The only way they have even a reasonable chance of trying to remove us is if they're running something with a heavy or super heavy anti-tank gun that's probably bigger than us. Right? I mean, it's probably more expensive than us. And in as much as it's not, we're probably more likely to remove them than they are to remove us in the first place. And worst case scenario, we just roll something like a T20 Come Some Let's or something else like that so that we're providing heavy cover to the tank to help it survive. Now we're shrugging off the hits that they're trying to do to us 50% of the time. We're shooting back at them, and we may not have that difficulty, right? And so all we're doing is we're just going to stack the center. We're going to pin down enemies from long range with our supporting fire tools. We're going to run a whole bunch of units up behind the T20, behind the KV-1. You can turn it sideways if you want to provide cover for more and more units to just kind of pile up inside a box if you want to. But the point being, trying to actually break this castle is going to be relatively difficult to do because we've got a heavy tank that's armored all around, shrugging pins. It's going to make this extremely difficult for the enemy to crack through. And so I think you can win that. And then finally, for breakthrough, we're going to shenanigan. Okay? As we do. I have shenaned once. I will shenan again. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to have that Come Some Let's with a platoon commander and 2 AT rifle teams. You can throw in another platoon commander. I tend to find I like the morale bubbles, so I'm not going to. Okay? You're going to deploy the Come Some Let's behind terrain. Okay? And then the first 3 order dice of turn 1, you're just going to go down with the Come Some Let's occupants unless you really feel like you need to punch something that's currently out there, right? Unless you really feel like you want to shoot. But you can afford to hang back and wait if you want to. And then really late turn 1, the Come Some Let's is going to run to a safe place far up to prepare for turn 2 because it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to get off the board. However, it is not impossible. If you're running breakthrough and it's quarters deployment, if you deploy as far up as you can with that T20 Come Some Let's, just beyond 12 inches of the center point, and just at the ends of one of your 2 edges of your deployment zone, and you can draw a beeline to the very edge of your opponent's deployment zone edge of their quarter. That is within 18 inches. At which point, don't go down with the Comes and Lets Riders first. The very first dice of the very first activation, which at 17 order dice, you actually have a reasonable chance of getting. A pretty good chance of getting against most standard lists, because most people are going to be somewhere closer to 15, 16. Maybe they're 17 or 18, but that means at least a 50% chance, if not over the cusp of that. Just give the run order to the Come Some Lets, run your 4 guys, run those units off the table, and you've now scored 4 units. And now for the entire rest of the game, all you have to do is puppy guard your deployment zone edges. You don't have to push up at all. You don't have to maneuver at all. You can just sit back, put units on ambush, and as people start moving in order to try to get across the board, just light them up. That's the whole rest of the game. If they try to shoot at you and you don't feel like losing that tool because you want to use it for later, just go down. And as they try to maneuver up the board, you're setting the stage for future turns where you have the tools, you have everything that you need, and you can punch them. Because you've already scored 12 points. 12 points. They would have to get like their entire army into your deployment zone in order to try to equal that, as long as you can keep them from getting off the table. So just keep them from doing the exact same shenanigans to you, and you're good to go. One of the best ways to do that, by the way, make sure you park something that you really like and that's relatively durable. Could be an autocannon, could be an armored vehicle like the T-60. Just park them on a road so that way people can't just zippity-doo-dah down the road in order to get off really, really quick. Make sure you do that. That is always a good idea on Breakthrough. It doesn't matter what armor you're using. That's always a good idea. But as long as you do that, your chances of winning this are extremely high. And so, scenarios are winnable. You can do it, okay? If you are bumping up to 1250, there are some changes I would make. I would generally keep this list pretty close to how I have it, okay? I would definitely consider adding more armored vehicles, both because getting up to 19 order dice would be pretty solid. You want to aim for roughly around 18 to 20 probably. If you want to guarantee that first turn 1 activation, 18 to 20 is probably what you want to look at. And between the T-60s, the ZIS-30s, the Su-76Is, you've got some good options here. Those are only going to run you between 105, 115, maybe 135 points, depending on how you want to kit these things out. They're relatively cheap. So you could easily throw those in and still bump up some stuff. You could make some of the AT rifles regular. You might consider switching out the artillery platoon for a heavy weapons platoon and taking something that's a little bit more durable, maybe gives a little more punch. The one problem with the horse-drawn limbers is they aren't going to contribute actively to order dice removal. They're just providing order dice and cover for your men. At the same time, if you keep the artillery platoon, you could switch out 1 or 2 of them for maybe MT-13 mortars, which is basically just a heavy mortar, but it hits like a heavy howitzer. So it's like buying a heavy howitzer for cheaper. You admittedly don't get the one guy. You're down 1 crewman, and you're also down a gun shield, but you also have a dramatically shorter minimum range for ranging in. And while you can only range in indirectly on this thing, you can't fire it directly. If you hit something, it's going to hurt, and there's no cover safe, right? So the MT-13 Murder might be worth looking into. More on those in a future video. You might also consider bulking out your infantry sections. I'm not sure you necessarily need them, because even with objective control missions, again, we have a plan for getting those. Just clear everything off with the overwhelming amount of autocannons and large vehicles that we have, and then just follow up with softer stuff once the coast is clear, because you don't have to control them for most of the game. Right? It's not like Star Wars Legion or other games where you score every single turn. You're scoring at the end of the game, right? And so as long as you can clear stuff, it'll be fine. But if you do want extra, just sheer numbers of bodies to give you a margin, because right now we only have the 6 Siberian veterans and the 5 guardsmen as our squads that we're pushing up, you can do that. Even inexperienced infantry squads could be an advantage, because at least an inexperienced squad will give you a number of bodies that you can remove. So you might consider doing that. Personally, I wouldn't, but it is at least an option. And that's the video. That is how I would run a KV-1. Again, if you want to play one, I think there is a viable way to do it. In fact, I think there's 2 viable ways to do it. With Finns, it's a little more tricky because, again, you don't get access to all the inexperienced stuff. You have to take a bunch of stuff regulars. But if you keep that rifle platoon relatively cheap while taking things like light mortars and AT rifle teams in there, and if you take a KV-1 escorted by, maybe some cheap T-26s, right, or something like that, and then maybe you probably do want to go for something like a heavy weapons platoon, although, how much more cheap are the order dice by comparison to your artillery platoon? because you can't take things in experience. So you're looking at like 30-point light mortar teams and 25-point AT rifle teams. Probably still a good idea. And I think you get to 16 order dice. I had trouble getting above 16 with stuff that I still really liked. But it is viable and it is doable. And so I think if you've been thinking about it, if you own one in your collection, you're like, I really want to run it, but it's just a meme. May I present to you? You want to play a KV1? Play it because you can win. If this has been helpful, please let us know down in the comments below. Do you think that I'm being overly generous to the list that I presented and that there are relatively easy counters to what we presented? Let us know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.